Okay, good afternoon. Somebody's got to go first. It won't be me.
Hey,
Take
just,
hang on. That's my arrow.
just in general, the Texas footprint you've created, what do you think that's just kind of meant to the league? I mean, Florida, for example, is playing A&M a week after playing Texas. I mean, that's like the Southwest Conference, like the Southeast Conference.
No, it's the Southeastern Conference.
I know.
I lived in north of Dallas for 11 years, so I had a full experience of Texas football in Texas, high school football in Texas, college football in Texas, and when Texas A&M's president at the time called Mike Slive on a Thursday night, the next morning Mike asked me, and I said, Texas is an economic engine as a state. We recruited, I think, probably at that time, like 6 of our 12 quarterbacks could play high school football in Texas. If you go back to like 2010, 11, 12. And I think we've all magnified each other. It's a big deal.
Are you getting any signals that the SCORE Act has a real chance of being passed in Congress?
Yes. Yeah, there's debate. There should be debate. There's obviously a lot happening in Washington and around what happens in Washington. You take the Middle East and the work that's been done there, the budget impasse and government funding, but there's still work happening, and I think there's an opportunity. When you look at, the work to both inform, educate Congress, work with Congress, for us since 2019-20, this is as close as we've been to having either chamber consider legislation on the floor. So there's a lot that can be helpful there, and there's still plenty of work to do.
Can you tell me some of the things that the SEC likes about that act?
Sure. In general, the ability to return national standards to college athletics. The young people on our teams ask me continually when I say, what's important to you? They want to know if I'm playing for Florida and I'm lining up against Texas A&M, or vice versa, I'm playing for Texas A&M lining up against Florida. We just want to know our opponents are held to the same standards. So that's one. Second, it supports the economic opportunities that have been provided. There is some clarity around sports sponsorship that's been embedded. I do think state preemption is important. The ability to have that, to meet the request, which I think is really common sense by our student athletes, to know that the opponent is playing by the same rules they are, is going to require preemption of 38 or so state laws. So those are some of the high level issues.
What have been your thoughts so far on the CSC and what they've been able to do under the House settlement?
Well, if you recall the movement to settlement, in fact, we were talking as a staff on Thursday. It was maybe the 4th inning of Game 3 of the Softball College World Series when the decision was announced. So we're in early June with the July 1st onset date. There were some stats put out a few weeks ago. 70% of what had been submitted had been processed. There's some deals that are not approved, some that are subject to additional review. The bulk of the deals have been approved and moved through. So I think that's a good start. When you're building an organization and you're doing it waiting for a decision, you want to do as much work in advance as you can. We couldn't in 3 weeks. And so there's still a lot of work to do. But Brian Seeley's been meeting regularly with commissioners. We'll actually have an opportunity to visit with Brian at our president's meeting coming up. And I think from a workflow with Deloitte, from the LBI folks and the CSC, I think has gotten off to an imperfect start, but a healthy start.
There have been some reports about the Big Ten exploring private equity. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts, concerns about that avenue in college sports.
Sure, I have thoughts and concerns. I know what I read, so I'm not in the middle of those conversations. We've had plenty of ideas over the last few years. Out of respect to our colleagues, we'll have to see what decisions they make. They have the details and the information that I don't.
What was your reaction to the Jabbar Jalute incident with Florida? Just what was the process like of just working with them?
Which particular? There's a lot of incidents that happen.
At LSU when he got suspended 3 games, the assistant coach for Florida. Today's the last game that he's suspended for.
That came in a film review. It's not something that was identified. You just can't do that. It's a very simple reality. You cannot do that. appreciate the collaboration, communication with Scott Strickland, but you can't do that. Period.
With the 9 games now on the table moving forward, and I know that pretty much ensures, of course, the Texas and Texas A&M game. How important are games like that to the SEC and making sure this works?
Very important. In fact, I was reading some notes flying over here dating back to August of 2021, right after we announced the move to 16 members, where balance and fairness and honoring rivalries were 3 of the principles identified for how we would schedule. And that's when we had all number of games on the table. So that's been a central theme. And to have the balance, when you add the goal of moving our teams through regularly, Georgia still hasn't been to College Station, as I recall. We don't want that. We want our fans to experience our teams. We want our teams to experience different venues. I think that keeps our schedule fresh. The balance, I think we've got a 9% variance between the highest winning percentage of a 9-game schedule and the lowest in the divisional days. You had a 29% spread. So there's a lot of good there, but one of the fundamental issues was, to the extent we could, to honor rivalries. And I think 10 of the 11 games have been played 100 times are included in the annual opponents.
With the deadline approaching for deciding the future college football playoff format, just what do you see as the biggest hurdles in these next few weeks to come to to finalize what the format would be moving forward?
We have a format for 26. It's 12 teams with 5 conference champions. The issue is, do we move? Do we adjust? Do we revise that format? Agreement is the word, and there are a lot of ideas. There's not agreement on the ideas. And whether there would be agreement on something different, that remains to be seen. And if we're not able to achieve that agreement, the 12 teams remains. I'll go back to what I said at our meetings in Destin. We had our football coaches, our athletics directors, our presidents and chancellors. We did a deep dive on the numbers, on the comparative ranking since the CFP has existed in the 2014 season. And we put that up against the ideas. And where we came out as a league, and we've never had unanimity, but where we came out as a league is a 16-team format. Seems best with all that's happening in college football, some of the parity, keeping the 5 conference champion agreement that exists and having 11 at-larges is the direction we think is healthy for everyone. Provides opportunities, doesn't displace teams unnecessarily through automatic bids, if you will, that the number grows, and people would earn it in a combination of on the field and through the selection process. And I think what's important, I was reading this on the trip over, is the adjustments the CFP has made to strength of schedule, strength of record, the ranking rather than seeding approach. So we're going to have them ranked and they'll fit into the bracket based on that ranking. How that plays out will be an educational process. Unfortunately, we have to make a decision before, and I think that 16-team model remains our preferred direction.
There's been some talk about the pooling of TV rights, and I think you said you're not for it. Can you tell me why you don't think that's a good idea?
Well, I watch TV numbers every week. I think we're in a really great position. We've made well-informed, I think well-supported decisions as a league. And what I want is the same opportunity I think every league wants, is the ability to negotiate their own deals, not turn those over to some unknown, undescribed entity. I also work pretty closely with a variety of folks who are experts in this, who talk directly about value and models for negotiating. These other ideas, they have numbers. They're actually not supported by data. They're just presented. And anybody can find an expert or two to justify their position. We like to dig into things. We're going to prepare just as we did for expansion, just as we did for our last media rights negotiation. We'll prepare for our future as the Southeastern Conference. I also think it's important to understand there's not some tweak to the Sports Broadcasting Act. The interest of networks, the interest of professional leagues go well beyond just college sports. And that has to be acknowledged as opposed to simply observed that here's a quick
been a lot
Commissioner-
of there's been a lot of parity in the results, certainly the first month of the season, in terms of the
Which
league.
results? Oh, our
SEC
league?
conference, yeah. Just curious your thoughts on that and how that could play out in December if there are a number of 1 or 2 lost teams in the league.
I'll go back. I think the strength of schedule, strength of record adjustment made by the CFP is important for us to see how that plays out. You look at our league, there was one time we had 11 of the top 25. By any definition, that's disproportionate and highly competitive. I think we're now at 9 or 10. Our games are intense. I saw Alabama, Missouri, most of it. I was in my office earlier today, a 3-point game. All of our games being played right now are within 1 score, and that's good football. And I think that's unique in the nation. I can go back to one of these things is not like the other quote from Sesame Street a couple of years ago. I think that definition still exists.
Is there a point where like all the spending gets unsustainable in football? When you look at some guys could get $15-20 million buyouts by the end of this year. You get staffs that are just enormous, coaching salaries, etc. Rev share is thrown in there now.
Well, I think we've seen some change. Is revenue share has been a part of our lives this year. As the name, image, likeness activities continue to increase, I think there have been some changes in contracts. I would expect some of that will continue. People are thinking differently. We've had schools announce staff reductions. So I think we're seeing some of those changes. What we've not done is reduce opportunities for young people. So kind of the combination of the SCORE Act and observations about the Sports Broadcasting Act. Just to be clear, we can sustain our support for Olympic sports. We added 1,200 scholarships this year as a league, 60% of those in women's sports, right around 40% in men's sports, none in football. That means what we've done with the new opportunities is support women's sports and Olympic sports with absolute clarity. We're running an ad today where I think we lead in that number. So that's our commitment. That's what we want to see continue, and that'll create some adjustments to answer your question.
Obviously, it's early in the season still, but when you look at the year the A&M's having, what's that do for the conference and to have a program like that?
I think for all of us at this point in the season, we use it early was like week 1, and then it's a grind after that. Every year, back to my Southland Conference days, you look forward to week 1, and then it's like week after week after week. I look broadly. I think we're having another remarkable football season, highly competitive, highly intense. My observation about close scores here, they've got a chance to play a quality Southeastern Conference opponent, beat a ranked opponent at home last week, so they're clearly ready to play. But when you've got a goose egg on the right-hand side of your standings, that puts a little pep in your step, in my experience, right? No matter what it is.